in his, when you're really adept at playing a deck well, it's why you play decks like Blue, White, Red Flash. Really, you'd say reward good players. Even when Dave loses games, they're going to be long games here. Neither of these decks are able to win very quickly. So because of that, the longer the game goes on, the more decisions that will happen in the game, and the kind of like the more jousting you'll get to see between the players.
Another thing to think about as well, Jeff Hoogland has gotten a lot of mileage out of having an unknown list. Both of these players had full access to these lists overnight, could do as much studying as they wanted before this match.
Yeah, the list really isn't unknown. The question is, though, has Shiels put in the work? And we're going to find out as we start our match.
Land versus land to begin.
So I think one of the difficult situations in this matchup is you see Hoogland's deck rock control, and it is a control deck, but in this matchup, Dave's going to try to force Hoogland to become an aggro deck. Because, Dave's deck is the deck with Sphinx's Revelation in it. Jeff has his own black Revelation in the form of Desecration Demon with Disciple of Bolus, but that has a lot more moving parts and a lot more things that have to go right. Jeff wants the game to end much more than Dave does in this matchup.
Sign in Blood from Jeff, getting him 2 more cards, trying to recover from that mulligan. Exactly useful here in a deck that is not going to punish him for losing that 2 life, at least not for a while.
Yeah, well, what I like here is that really, both the decks kind of made similar plays there, where you see Think Twice and Sign in Blood. Both these decks showing off their card advantage engines. You see, despite Blue and Black both being good at drawing cards, I think I like the way that Blue does it a little bit more right here.
I mean, the cost of life is a real factor when you're talking about a deck that can use Restoration Angel and Warrior's Helix to chop away significant chunks of life. Oh, look at this! The rare hit with the Lifebane Zombie. Restoration Angel in hand. Goodbye, get exiled.
Well, and you see, so Dave Shiels' hand is a pair of Sphinx's Revelations, a pair of lands, and a Pillar of Flame. Yeah, he actually only has the 4 Restoration Angels as targets for Lifebane Zombies. This is an excellent hit by Jeff Hoogland. What he's going to have to still deal with, though, is that, so these Revelations from Shiels are going to be really important. Jeff did, in some ways, get a green light to start casting his spells, though. He knows that there's no answers, no control cards in Dave's hand outside of that pillar. He may try to, get an early Desecration Demon, or maybe even fire off a Disciple of Bolus.
Desecration Demon, an incredible card in this matchup. There are answers for Dave Shiels. Turn and Burn is an answer, Supreme Verdict is an answer, but if it hits, there's a lot of work that Dave Shiels has to do to get rid of a Desecration Demon.
Right, so if you're playing Dave Shiels' deck, when you see a Desecration Demon on the opposite side of the board, you don't always kill it right away. I think it really just becomes like a tempo game. For example, Augur Bolus answers it for 1 turn. Azorius Charm answers it for another turn, and you just need to keep temporarily answering it until you can Revelation for enough to have an infinite number of temporary answers, and then eventually it starts to feel permanent.
Yes. In for 1, this knocks Jeff Hoogland to 17.
Right, and this smells like Dave has drawn a Restoration Angel, and if I'm Hoogland, I would put him on this. That attack makes no sense unless Dave drew. It seems like he, I was expecting him to Restoration Angel then and block with Augur Bolus, as opposed to trading 1 damage for 3.
Well, the one thing, a lot of these new cards have lots of awesome abilities. I don't even know why, but this little Lifebane Zombie, it is an intimidating guy.
Oh, apologies, that it does have Intimidate. Okay, so he's not leaving it back to block, it's yes, okay, so he can't block it anyway. But fair enough, Shiels did have the resto.
If you look at the board, 4 swamps for Jeff Hoogland, no green mana in sight. I wonder if there are any green spells hiding in his hand.
So Dave Shiels augurs, he gets the rare choice off Augur between Azorius Charm and Dissipate. He's going to go ahead and go with the Dissipate, and I really do like this play here. He has the answer to Lifebane Zombie, so he actually has control of the board right now. He has Pillar. Because of the amount of Revelations he has and the Think Twice in his yard, he wants to have a counterspell so he can really just sit back and play lands for as long as possible.
If he can just take control of the stack, so to speak, and have his opponent not be able to put anything scary onto the table, that's going to be, right now, a race he'll definitely win. He can make almost a impression of a Merfolk deck in that way for a few turns.
Yeah, well, Shiels, he's ahead in almost every way right now. He's ahead on the board, he has the counter spell, and he has the Revelation. So he has the better late game, he has the current board state, and he does have the control right now.
we know that this can be dissipated. I would be unsurprised to see him stop this card. He could maybe even let it stick, but this is a reasonable choice. Either way, let's find out what Dave Shiels does. Does he view the 5 life as important, or does he think that he's not going to have to worry about it?
Well, the dissipate's his last counterspell, and you always want to be really careful with it. So if I'm Shiels is probably going over, all right, if I counter this and Jeff gets free reign on his next spell, what's the worst spell that could resolve? I think he goes over and decides that the worst spell is not too much worse than Thragtusk.
Now, Dave gets an actually quite excellent draw, I believe. He gets a land, and this puts him up to 6 mana once he drops that down, meaning that if he wants to, he can start getting very, very powerful Sphinx's Revelations.
Right. Key to this deck right now is that Dave wouldn't mind drawing a land almost every turn. He has those 2 Revelations. He has a Think Twice in the yard, a Think Twice in his hand. He has more cards whenever he wants them. The big limit is how much mana does he have. He doesn't ever want to miss a land drop.
We see another land. Untapped from Jeff Hoogland. The shields are down for Dave.
Oh.
And let's see if Jeff can put anything into play that's useful.
So we see there, Sphinx's Revelation, really the cornerstone for most of the blue-white decks right now in Standard. Just instant, draw X, gain X life, draw X cards. Really, can be a win condition almost by itself.
For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here in the booth with Matthias Hunt. On the left, Dave Shiels with Flash. On the right, Jeff Hoogland with The Rock. It's a classic old school versus a classic new, or a new old deck versus a new deck, depending on how you want to think of it.
So you see here, the second Thragtusk resolves from Hoogland, and Dave is just going to be content drawing cards. He flashed back a Think Twice to see if he could dissipate the Thragtusk. He wasn't able to, so he's just going to play another Think Twice and draw more cards. He already has his 7th land set up for this turn, and really is in control of the board state.
Okay, Dave taking a moment to think. You can see that Thragtusk there, a 5/3 body, and Dave, a Angel and an Augur of Bolas. In comes the Angel, the Augur hangs back, not willing to suicide itself.
Yeah, and you're going to see I imagine we're going to see some really patient playing by Dave. Right now, you could say he could try to race, but I think he'll probably shy away from a race as much as possible. Even though he might win the race right now, it's probably safer for him to just never let the race start.
In the other bracket, Eric Smith with Jund has won the first game against James Buckingham with Hexproof. We're going to continue bringing you those results as they come in, but in the game underway, Jeff here, Thragtusk, Lifebane Zombie comes on down. That's probably only going to be a 3-1 because
if Shiels has the Restoration Angels, he's probably playing it right now. And you see that hand, yet another Think Twice, a third Think Twice, the land already, and 2 Revelations. It's a great hand for Dave Shiels. He has these Revelations and lots of mana, and he's just choosing not to cast them because he hasn't even felt the need to yet.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that this kind of deck could beat a deck like, say, Jund, is by going over the top. They do their little this and their little that, and it's all very efficient and very neat and nasty, and then you're like, I'll draw 5 cards.
Right. Yesterday when Cedric and I were talking, we made a comment where, Cedric Snally said, I bet you'd rather be casting a Sphinx's Revelation than playing Jund. And I came back with a response, and I said, actually, I'd rather be not having a Sphinx's Revelation and not casting it, because that means I get to maybe play even more lands, and I think we're seeing Shiels do that.
Jeff doing his own Sphinx's Revelation impression here. Disciple of Bolas comes into play. Well, if it resolves, what that's going to mean is he'll be able to sacrifice another creature, gain life, and draw a ton of cards. If he were to sacrifice his Thragtusk, he would draw 5 cards, the power of his Thragtusk.
Right, so that's basically what I said. It's the Black Sphinx's Revelation. Certainly something that Shiels has to be concerned about. He may go fishing for a counterspell here. In the end, Shiels only plays 2 Dissipate and 2 Syncopate in the main, along with, I think, 1 Rewind. So not that many counterspells. There's a good chance that this will resolve. Even so, Shiels probably is still okay in the situation, but this is one of the best draws that Hoogland could have.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the most efficient way to possibly try to answer is to think twice and see if you can find something. Otherwise, you're throwing away a Sphinx's Revelation for very little effect. Think twice.
Do it once. He hits, it looks like another land. And he's going to go ahead with the flashback. He still could hit Syncopate for 1.
Think again.
And
Rewind,
he hits
very
Rewind.
close.
Rewind, he hits the counterspell, but he hits it 1 card too late. That's going to work. And so Hoogland's going to get to refuel.
Wow. Now you'll notice he did that before attacking, and you might wonder why. Well, what if, for the sake of argument, something went wrong during combat, like say Jeff found his creature killed, and then he'd only draw 3 cards.
Right, or even more, it could be Azorius Charm. It's an interesting play, because usually you'd say, well, who would Azorius Charm a Thragtusk? But it's actually a play that once you're far enough ahead, that a blue-white-red flash deck is fine making. 5
extra cards, 5 life. Sounds a lot like a Sphinx's Revelations with 8 mana to me.
It's very similar. So now both players are going to get to be playing on 7-card hands against each other again. Still though, Jeff's playing a black deck, whereas Shiels is playing a blue deck. So if you told him, if you told a blue deck that he could start a game on roughly equal life totals with both players having 8 lands in play and 7 cards in hand, I imagine most blue mages would be fine with that situation.
The really scary cards that Jeff could bring into this game. Liliana is not terribly scary yet. There is not only the Angel in play, but a fodder in the form of Augur of Bolas. But should that Liliana get ramping up, that's a problematic card. Vraska also scary.
Yeah, I think it would be, what would be great here, or is interesting is once this game goes long enough, Jeff lacks, at least in the main deck, lacks a true late game trump. His best cards are Thragtusks, Desecration Demons, and like you said, maybe those Planeswalkers. But once players get into, Revelation territory, drawing lots of cards, there isn't a true card out of Jeff's deck that Dave really has to care about. Yeah,
you actually don't see a Garruk Primal Hunter in the main deck like a lot of these decks would like to run.
Exactly, and I think it's the mana is the reason you don't see it in the main deck.
Green, green, green is hard for a deck that intends to cast Mutilate to good effect. Jeff laying a land. What will he follow up with?
Yeah, he has almost all the weapons at his disposal right now. We saw in his hand he has a Liliana, he has a Desecration Demon. He has most of the cards that his deck really could produce for him. The question is whether or not they're going to be enough.
Jeff thinking here. Putrefy on the Angel. Yes, says Dave Shiels, leaving his Rewind in reserve for something more threatening.
Right, so what Hoogland's doing is he's going to try to use an aggro plan here. Even though he knows about the double Sphinx's Revelation, he knows what he has to fight through. I think he's recognizing that he still is the aggro deck in this matchup. He still has to be trying to win, because if he doesn't try to win, he's not going to win. The longer this game goes on, it will favor Dave.
Liliana.
And Shiels might be fine letting it plus up. Shiels has all these revelations. The Liliana may actually hurt Hoogland more than it hurts Shiels.
Let's see if it resolves.
Yeah, well, it might not resolve. It's one of the ways that Hoogland can actually win the late game. If it resolves and Hoogland somehow manages to get it to 6 counters, then that's something that actually will win the game for him.
Rewind.
Yep. So, and I think Shiels recognizes that, and this card to him is worthy of a rewind. It's worthy of his counterspell.
Only a few counters left in the deck, 2 used up, but remember, Sphinx's Revelation is going to refill things really soon.
Well, eventually there's very few things he has to counter. Most of Hoogland's threats are creatures, which Shiels has plenty of ways to deal with. I think he's saving his counter spells for those non-creature permanents that he has trouble dealing with, like Liliana of the Veil, or maybe Vraska the Unseen.
While Dave is tapped out, Jeff takes this opportunity to use a Tragic Slip to kill the Augur of Bolas. Remember that we did see a death from Putrefy earlier, so that's -13 to the Augur of Bolas. This stops Dave from being able to use a Restoration Angel on his Augur.
Yeah, so the first revelation was fired off on X = 4. That's a pretty good revelation to have it be your first one. And we know he has at least one more in his hand, and now he's sitting on a full grip. We'll probably just continue making land drops for as long as possible.
With that hand, he can drop a 9th land. There's a Restoration Angel in Dave's hand amongst many other cards. Dave sitting very comfortably right now. Jeff needs to get something going. He needs to get a Desecration Demon, a Vraska, some sort of resilient, powerful threat. Maybe perhaps Jeff's best possibilities here are just to lay Thragtusk after Thragtusk.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, Jeff needs to be aggressive. He needs to force Dave to have the answers. Even though Dave drew 7 cards and likely has the answers, it's the best plan of attack that Jeff has in the matchup. You know, if he waits long, every turn he waits, the chance that Dave has the answers he needs will just continue to go up.
Okay, if you see that hand, Sphinx's Revelation, Snapcaster Mage, Restoration Angel, Hallowed Fountain,
I think
Glacial Fortress.
Yeah, I think a whole trove of lands. It looks like those are the only spells he has right now, are the Resto, the Snapcaster, and then 2 more Revelations. Which, you know, not really a bad place to be in. Snapcaster with a graveyard full of counter spells and a Restoration Angel to rebuy it is a pretty good place for Dave to be on this board. So we see a swing from Jeff Hoogland. It'll be interesting here to see whether or not Dave wants to ambush that beast with the angel. Because that angel right now, if he gets the Snapcaster down, could potentially be another counter spell.
And we see a Moorland Haunt activation, creating a spirit blocking the Disciple of Bolas. And now Desecration Demon makes an appearance. Snapcaster could provide an answer if Dave wants to.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a creature, so originally you think Dave wouldn't want to counter it. That said, he actually hasn't drawn much of his main deck creature removal. Remember, he has 2 Supreme Verdicts in the main, not the full set. His other ways to deal with creatures tend to be red-based, so actually Desecration Demon can be a little tough for him to deal with. It might get that counter spell.
Yeah, and there we see the Snapcaster. It's going to stop that with either a Rewind or a Dissipate. Now, in one of the other brackets, Andrew Tension with Naya wins Game 1 versus Michael Braverman playing Junk Aristocrats.
Now, that'll be interesting to see how that kind of matchup goes post-board. Remember, Michael Braverman has not lost a match yet in Standard in the Invitational.
Okay. The Snapcaster Mage comes into play, a Rewind is cast, and a Moorland Haunt is untapped. Oh, pardon me.
Yes, yeah, so you use the Moorland, he used the Rewind to untap the Moorland Haunt. It's that trick where you actually get to have 2 activations of the same land in one turn.
And why is there a Desecration Demon in play? Because Jeff had 2.
So so one of them does get to resolve, so now Dave's actually going to have to answer it. He doesn't have the answer in hand, he may have to Revelate for one.
Okay, we're untapping now. You see a Snapcaster Mage and a Spirit on Dave Shiels' side of the board. Jeff Hoogland with a Desecration Demon and a 3/3 Beast.
Yeah, so Dave's managing to keep the creatures, as long as he manages to keep the creatures even and the life totals the same, then he's definitely ahead right now. Remember, Hoogland got to draw those 5 cards off the Disciple of Bolas. It was a really powerful thing, but Hoogland is running out of cards again, whereas Shiels, he has 2 more Revelations in hand.
Also, from yet another matchup, Jerry Thompson wins Game 1 with Blue-White-Red versus Dustin Flora playing Junk Reanimator. In comes the Desecration Demon and the Beast. No creatures are sacrificed, so the Desecration Demon is not tapped.
Right, Shiels might take a hefty amount of damage here. We'll see what's going to happen. I think instead it's going to get put on the top of the deck.
You talked about this earlier, Matthias, about Azorius Charm just providing temporary answer after temporary answer, all the while having access to Sphinx's Revelation.
Well, you can actually think about it as a removal spell, as card advantage, if you think about it this way. Every time you put a creature on top of their deck, it gives you another turn to make another land drop, which gives you another card off your Sphinx's Revelation. When you think about it that way, you're realizing this Azorius Charm actually is drawing a card in a sort of roundabout way.
It's an interesting point, too. I like that very much. Now, again, going to another bracket, Eric Smith and James Buckingham. It's evened up 1-1, Jund versus Hexproof. But in this match, we have a Desecration Demon placed on top of Jeff's library. Dave, though, at a precarious 7 life. However, his ability to respond or to gain life to get out of the life deficit, very, very easy. Jeff does not have an access to a card to stop that life gain. He's not playing red here. It's black-green. It's the rock.
Yeah, Dave's going, it's misleading when you see Dave at 7. The thing is that Dave's letting himself get to 7 here because he knows that Jeff has no direct damage, and he has the Sphinx's Revelations in his hand. He has the way to go back up to a bigger life total. He's just choosing not to cast it yet.
10 mana. That represents 7 cards, 7 life. Just call it contract from below.
Right. And you know what I mean? Like I said, the best thing about a Sphinx's Revelation is to just have one and never cast it.
And you see Dave Shiels throws away a spirit just to preserve his life total. We knew that Desecration Demon was out there.
All right, so it's recast by Hoogland. Hoogland has a Swamp, it looks like, a Putrefy, and one other card in his hand, but he's almost out of weapons. It looks like Gaze of Granite, Swamp, and Putrefy.
Look at Jeff there. He does not look excited about his chances.
I think he knows what's happening right now. He's run out of resources, and because Shiels has these Revelations, I think Hoogland knows that it's going to be very hard for him to get. He was very fortunate that first time to get the Disciple Bolus on a Thragtusk. He knows that he probably will not be so fortunate again.
So, Restoration Angel cast by Dave to flash and to return the Snapcaster to play. However, Jeff uses that Putrefy you mentioned to stop that from happening.
Yeah, my mistake. It actually was an Abrupt Decay, which is better here because it stops Shields from being able to counter back.
Yes.
Still has the same effect.
And we see at the end of turn another Spirit created.
Right, just off that freshly killed Snapcaster Mage, just going to go ahead and come back as a Spirit token. So, question, when you're Dave Shiels and you're doing this, he's clearly getting control of the board, so you might ask how he plans to win the game. And the answer, it really is just attacking with a couple Restoration Angels.
Yep, any old thing that he has left. And we see the sacrifice of the Spirit to make the Desecration Demon tap, and I expect we're going to have a huge card draw moment happen in just a moment. Is that going to be 8 cards, 8 life?
Well, we'll see. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a full-out Sphinx's Revelation.
Boom. 8 cards, 8 life.
And that should put him in a position where he can win, where he can actually start becoming aggressive. He's now evened up his life total with Jeff Hoogland.
If I was Jeff right now, I might just scoop it up, expecting Dave to very much not make any mistakes and just reserve my own mental energy. I know Patrick Chapin, the author of Next Level Deck Building, has said he only likes to make a few decisions in any given game because you know what? It takes up energy, and in a long, long weekend, in a long match, 5 games, best of 5, just preserving that energy can be valuable.
And that's why I think what Hoogland might do here is make Shiels play it. Hoogland is done making decisions this game. He can just draw his card and play it. But Shiels still has to make decisions and figuring out to win. So if you find it exhausting to make decisions, maybe it's best then to force your opponent to make more of them here.
Look at Jeff. Yeah, He's resigned to his fate.
I mean, he knows what's going to happen, but yeah, Shiels is going to have to still win it. And that's more energy that Shiels has to expend, and maybe then gives Hoogland a break while Shiels has to continue playing.
Augur, is that okay? Sure, that's okay. Yeah, why not? If you whiff, if you hit, I don't really care.
And it looks like it misses, so it's just a 1/3. Be interesting to see, so Shiels really does win as an afterthought with this deck. He has a pair of War Leaders Helixes, so I think he'll be able to do it relatively quickly. He can swing Hoogland down to 13 here. He has at least 10 points of burn in his hand. So you may see a fairly quick ending here.
Jeff hit by that Restoration Angel, and Dave has to figure out what to discard.
Well, Jeff Hoogland said he knew that game 1 was going to be rough. It did turn out to be that way. He stuck one of his really swingy plays. He got that Disciple of Bolus on a Desecration Demon, but you still can't go late with the Revelation deck. You still have to put pressure on, and Jeff was not able to put enough pressure on fast enough before the game became a Revelation fest.
Desecration Demon untaps. Jeff draws Sign in Blood. Why not? Let's Sign in Blood. 2 cards is great, right?
Targeting himself, okay. He does hit, and he hits 2 great cards. He hits a Disciple of Bolus and a Thragtusk.
Those are great. If this game was not already so scarily, I think, out of reach, that would be awesome.
This is one of his best late game weapons, and you know, he's got to try for it, even if he doesn't think it's gonna work. Interestingly, I don't know how good Disciple is in this matchup because it takes a threat off the table. We saw here, you know, Hoogland was able to disciple his own creature. He drew a lot of cards, but actually, that put him. It didn't. You know, he was behind when Shiels cast Revelation, and that drawing 6 cards didn't really change the equation at all.
We see a Thrag Tusk for 5.
If you're Shiels, you may counter that to get a little aggressive here, because you may want to actually end the game. Because he has enough burn in his hand that he has some lethal swings coming up. He may not want Hoogland to gain 5 life. He may just want to try to push this to game 2. We'll see how. Yep, so he gets the Dissipate on the Thrag Tusk.
Thrag Tusk is removed. Any other plays from Jeff? A land, Disciple, perhaps, for 8.
And we see Syncopate at the ready in Shiels' hand, and we'll get that backcast as well. I believe that is all the counter spells in Shiels' deck. He has 2 Dissipates, 2 Syncopates, and a Rewind in the main. I think we've seen all 5 of them.
Now, if that spell had resolved, I think Jeff would actually be right back in it.
Oh, I mean, he'd have a lot more cards. So what he actually can hope to do is that if he can start running Shiels' deck out of answers. You know, like I said, that's all his counter spells. You know, so say Hoogland got to draw 8 there is this situation where Shiels might not be able to close out the game because he runs out of answers or cards in his deck.
So, if you are just joining us, this is the StarCityGames.com Open Series featuring the Invitational. This is the top 8 of the Invitational. Game 1 of this top 8 has ended between Dave Shiels and Jeff Hoogland. And what do we do during every single one of these top 8s? After that first game, we bring you our Star City Games premium giveaway. So make sure that you get here on the Twitter. Hashtag SCG Premium is how you're going to possibly win 3 free months of Star City Games Premium this round. Now what you do, we'll be asking you a trivia question. I think that you said you had a trivia question in mind earlier.
Yep, so we were talking about Next Level Deck Building, which is the new book from Patrick Chapin. If you stay with us all the way to the finals of the Invitational, we will be giving away another copy of that book. Right now, though, we are just giving away 3 months of Star City Premium, but we're going to ask you about some of the things in the book. I'm going to go ahead and let you ask this one, as it's kind of a magic history question.
Well, only vaguely a magic history question. Remember, you tweet in hashtag SCG Premium with the correct answer, and one person amongst those who correctly answers will receive 3 free months of Star City Games Premium. The question is very simple. What archetype of magic is closely associated with both Sol Malka,
the
Magic player, and wrestler Dwayne Johnson? What classic mid-range deck is closely associated with Sol Malka and wrestler Dwayne Johnson? I'll give you a very, very small hint. It's relevant to our top 8.
All right.
Make sure you put that hashtag SCG Premium, and thanks to Glenn Jones for this trivia question. It's very appreciated. We're going back then to our sideboards for our 2 players. Jeff Hoogland, well, he's got 3 Duress, I think, is going to be the first card that he brings in from his sideboard.
Hoogland said he didn't really like his game 1 matchup in this at all. But he said that post-board he felt like it got a lot better for him. And I think you hit the nose when you hit the nail on the head when you said that 3 Duress is where it starts. You know, that'll definitely get those Sphinx's Revelations out of Shiels' hand, maybe prevent Shiels from getting into the late game. Let's look at some of the other options he has here, though. First of all, he has Underworld Connections, almost certainly going to come in against a blue-white-red flash deck. He needs to make sure that he keeps up on resources as Dave starts to cast removal spells.
I think we're going to see every single one of the cards in his sideboard that can provide card advantage coming on in. So that also includes Deadbridge Chant. I would expect to see Deadbridge Chant come on in as well. I would not be surprised by Sever the Bloodline, a card that can take out all of the spirits from Moorland Haunt, or just be a very solid removal spell for a Restoration Restoration Angel, and then later in the game, take out the next Restoration Angel. Finally, increasing ambitions as a flashback card for similar kinds of things. And Liliana of the Veil, not great, but it's a potential option trying to build up to that -6 ultimate effect.
Remember, Jeff's main deck is an anti-creature deck, so as a result, he has a lot of things he would like to side out. We saw a Gaze of Granite sit in his hand for the entire game in game 1. He also has, Mutilates, he has Devour Flesh, he has Putrefy, cards which can Ratchet Bomb even, cards which are less than impressive in this matchup.
On the other side of the table, Dave Shiels, he's got negates. I think those 3 negates, much like they would against Jund, are going to be a very, very easy choice for Dave. A negate can stop a Duress, a negate can stop a Vraska, a negate can stop an Underworld Connections. Negate, an incredibly good weapon against a deck that's going to shift towards spells.
Right, and now Shiels has got to be happy he's playing against Rock instead of Jund. Usually the negates in that matchup are for, there's 2 really problematic cards that Jund plays. One would be the Garruk Primal Hunter, the second one would be Rakdos's Return. As you know, though, neither of those are actually in Jeff Hoogland's Rock deck. I still agree that I think the negates are coming in, but Shiels can be a little more aggressive with them as there aren't these game-winning things he needs to counter. What I'll be interested to see, though, is what he decides to do about Thundermaw Hellkite.
Yes, very much so.
Blue-White Red Flash oftentimes transitions to that in games where it feels like, if it's a matchup where it feels like it can't always win the late game, particularly like against Jund and Kessig Wolf Run, it'll board in Thundermaw Hellkite because that way it has the ability to end the game much faster. I don't know, so normally against Jund, Dave would board those in, but against the Rock, I don't know if he feels like he needs to tie up the late game. We saw him have a really great late game 1, so I'm interested to see which plan he goes with.
One of the things that's very interesting about Jeff's list, there are actually very few instant ways to kill a Thundermaw Hellkite. He's got a Putrefy in his main deck, a Putrefy in his board. He's got a Devour Flesh if the board is empty. And then other than that, you're talking about things like Tragic Slip with death already having occurred. That Thundermaw Hellkite could very easily be a card that comes in for 5 damage, and then Jeff, who might sideboard out creature removal, might just have to take the 5 and then still provide a sorcery speed answer, unless he's lucky.
Well, what I really like about Thundermaw Hellkite is that it forces Jeff Hoogland to keep cards like Putrefy in his deck if he sees a Thundermaw, and that's a card he really doesn't even want to be playing in this matchup because of how weak it is in general against a Blue-White Red Flash deck. But if Dave boards in Thundermaw Hellkites, well, Jeff can't just be cold to them. That card raises really well.
I think when we talk about what Jeff might sideboard out, I would probably start with 4 Lifebane Zombie, 2 Ratchet Bomb, and 1 Gaze of Granite. So he does have 7 cards that are fairly easy sideboards out. But even so, there's still too much creature removal for a general strategy that Dave Shiels is putting in forth. But if Thundermaw Hellkite hits the table, you cannot let it come unanswered.
Right. I'm just curious to see Jeff's approach in general. Like you said, boarding out Lifebane Zombie seems like a shoo-in. We saw it even get a Restoration Angel, and that really didn't, and he still lost the game at that point. The thing is he needs to make sure he can still win the game. He doesn't want to go toe-to-toe control deck versus control deck. Jund does do that in this matchup. They throw really good control cards at each other, but I'm not sure Jeff's deck is up to that sort of fight. It may need to be an aggro deck. Even though it's a somewhat anemic aggro deck, I think he may still keep it as one.
Turn 1 Duress.
Duress good here, not great here though. He has 3 options. He has Negate, Pillar of Flame, and Think Twice. Any of which are fine to take, none of which are great to get.
While we watch this Duress happen, James Buckingham has defeated Eric Smith. Hexproof will be in our semifinals.
He's up 2 games to 1 currently.
I apologize, 2-1, best of 5, so it's not over yet.
Yeah. Currently though, Jerry Thompson and Dustin Flora have equalized at 1-1.
Michael Braverman wins game 2. It's 1-1, Braverman versus Tenjum.
Alright, so after the Duress, Shiels will just start to develop his mana. He did lose the Pillar of Flame there, it looks like, from the Duress, which means Hoogland looks like he's setting up for a Scavenging Ooze.
There it is.
Scavenging is like one of the better aggro cards in this matchup. It actually gives Hoogland the ability to go on the aggressive side. I think the weakness of it in the matchup is that there really won't be very many creatures in the graveyard. It's almost like Jeff Hoogland's playing Grizzly Bears.
Yeah, I mean, it can eat a Think Twice. It can remove the graveyard so that a Snapcaster is not as effective later in the game.
Right.
But it's never going to be a huge powerhouse dominating the table unless a strange game has happened.
Yeah, it's a great utility creature, but it's not a great threat in this matchup. And I almost feel like what Jeff needs is a good threat, because the longer he doesn't have a threat, the closer we get to that point where Shiels has 7 lands in play.
I see that there's a Detention Sphere in Shiels' hand as well.
So third land there is Golgari Guildgate from Hoogland. Looks like he has no follow-up play.
Now he has a Swamp in hand, so if he wanted to, he could have cast a 3 casting cost spell.
Yeah.
But nothing there that he wanted to do.
What he did do there was he prevented Dave Shiels from casting Think Twice by leaving up the green mana for Scavenging Ooze.
Dave draws, has a Restoration Angel, a Negate, a Think Twice, 2 lands, a Detention Sphere.
Yep, and the challenge on Dave will be, I think really the most important thing he can do in this matchup right now is continue to hit his land drops. If he hits his land drops all the way up to 7, at least 7, he'll be a heavy favorite in this game.
And Jeff removes the Pillar of Flames from the graveyard. There will be no Snapcaster Pillar shenanigans.
You see a
Lifebane Zombie. That's going to hit a Restoration Angel.
Yep, so pretty good one for Jeff, and he actually waited a turn on playing that, it looks like, with the Woodland, by making Woodland Cemetery this turn, just so that he could hold up the mana to get Think Twice.
A Sphinx's Revelation has joined Dave Shiels' hand.
So I really like, Hoogland is really doing a good job of assessing where his deck's supposed to be right now. You know, he's denying Shiels that early card advantage and really hoping to lock Shiels on a small amount of mana. You know, he has to do whatever he can to stop Shiels from making every land drop, because it's unlikely that Jeff will end the game before Shiels gets a lot of lands.
And one of the things that you were saying earlier about the roles these respective decks can play, if Jeff doesn't close a game out, let's pretend they both are answering each other empty-handed, and then they get into a top deck war. You do not want to get into a top deck war against a deck with Sphinx's Revelation.
No, and we kind of saw that in game 1. You know, both of them got to develop their lands up to 7 or 8, and both of them really executed their best late game play, and it wasn't particularly close after that. The blue deck was much better.
It really is hard to beat a Sphinx's Revelation when it comes to late game plays.
Yeah, well, I mean, Sphinx's Revelation has this really fun thing where it kind of combos with itself. If it's big enough, it just draws more copies of itself. So a 4 of Sphinx's Revelation can be your entire late game, you know, whereas Jeff needs to put pieces together to make his late game. He needs to have that Disciple with the Desecration Demon.
Okay, we see the end of turn Think Twice. Jeff immediately eats it. Dave knew that was going to happen, but he decided, you know what? I just need the card. I need to get a land. And he found one immediately with that Think Twice.
Right, so he has 2 more lands. He has enough land to get up to 5. Remember, I kind of think that magic number is either 6 or 7. You know, if Dave hits that land drop on curve, he's probably, then things start getting bad for Hoogland. Right now he has 5, so we'll see how much, you know, I think he's a favorite to get there.
Another land in play. His hand, Sphinx's Revelation, Negate, Detention Sphere, and a few other cards as well.
A Dissipate, I think, is also in there, which is a pretty important one. So really, he just needs, he can use some of his life points as resources here. He just needs to buy time and make sure that nothing really bad happens before he starts getting to the Revelation spot.
We see Jeff very carefully choose to make his attack. Thinks for a second and then yells, yes, both of these guys are coming on in.
Yeah, there could be another Restoration Angel in Dave's hand. Jeff does know that there wasn't one before, but Dave has drawn 2 cards since then.
I think I see a Ratchet Bomb in Jeff's hand.
Yeah, he's boarded that in this matchup. I'm not sure whether it's an endorsement of Ratchet Bomb or rather kind of disappointment at his other options that has him keeping that in.
No 5th land for Jeff. Jeff Hoogland here, stuck on mana. Dave Shiels does have a 5th mana, and did he just top deck a Restoration Angel?
It's interesting, it's not the mana that hurts Jeff Hoogland here. You know, he doesn't necessarily need more than 4 mana. What hurts is that he didn't play anything else, that he didn't have yet another threat. You know, right now he has a 3-turn clock, and that's a 3-turn clock assuming that Shiels does nothing, no revelations, no removal spells, which isn't really a reasonable assumption.
Yeah. Dave may be considering a detention sphere. There it is at the front of his hand.
Yeah, he has a detention sphere here. He didn't play it last turn. He was waiting so that he could hold up negate.
Now, a detention sphere can take care of either one of these creatures for now. He gets rid of the Lifebane zombie. Now, an Abrupt Decay, should Jeff still have it in his deck, would stop the detention sphere from holding it back, regardless of a negate.
He would also get the Restoration Angel that Dave had just top decked. If he had one, it'd be like a very strong play. I don't believe he has one in his hand though. He draws his second Ratchet Bomb actually.
Dave with the Restoration number 3 in hand. There's a Desecration Demon, something that Jeff would have liked to have dropped last turn.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was playing around counter spells. Here he still could have been syncopated. He wasn't playing around that counter spell, but I think he's feeling the pressure right now, and he knows that he has to get some damage in because he knows that Shiels has the Revelation. He knows Shiels is making land drops. I think he's aware of like this window which he can win is closing quickly.
Negate, Sphinx's Revelation, Restoration Angel, land. It looks like Dissipate. 2 counter spells is really powerful. And Dave Shiels, land go.
Yeah, I mean, those counter spells are really good here. Remember that Hoogland's deck, especially, it only has 17 creatures in it. And that's all, those are really the only things that Shiels needs to counter. And some of them, like Scavenging Ooze, he doesn't even really need to counter. Against a deck that's not very threat dense like Hoogland's, counter spells can be really powerful.
I see a Thrag Tusk in Jeff's hand.
Yeah, he does have the Thrag Tusk. I still don't think he has the 5th land. It looks like he has a Disciple of Bolus, 2 Ratchet Bombs, it looks a Thrag Tusk, maybe it looks like another Lifebane zombie. And
Andrew Tenjum in the other bracket wins game 2. They're gonna go to game 4. It's Tenjum with Naya, 2-1 over Junk Aristocrats, moving on to game 4.
Yeah, so this game turns out, this one really is the slugfest. It's the control mirror. They're still on game 2 here though, but that slow pace is really, I think, what Shiels wants to have happen.
Desecration Demon comes on in with the Scavenging Ooze. A Restoration Angel from the clouds. Wow, are we gonna see a draw 6?
Yeah, it looks so. Hoogland's gonna go ahead with the draw 6 Desecration Demon. He got Shiels all the way down to 3 on that play. Now he's gonna go up to 26. The question is whether or not he can sneak across that last 3 damage. We saw this last game. Hoogland got, his Black Revelation of draw 6. Or at that time, I think it was draw 5, gain 5. And he really wasn't able to do anything with the extra cards. He wasn't able to do anything to compete with what Shiels' deck was doing. This time is a little different in that he already has Shiels on 3. So he might be able to force Shiels into some less than optimal plays. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not he can make the most of this situation. He maybe, that window of winning, he might have bought himself like 1 or 2 turns to work with.
And Jeff was really hoping to find a duress there. That would have been devastating. Well, not devastating, it would have summoned a negate. But
yeah.
He did not find it. Instead, he's gonna have to discard one of his cards.
Yeah, he has all these Ratchet Bombs. I can't imagine he's keeping all of them. It doesn't look like they're gonna matter much in the matchup.
Discards a Ratchet Bomb and a Swamp that he could have really used much earlier in the game.
The Swamp's really good. I don't know if it's very good right now. And Shiels, he's at that 6 man. I remember kind of the whole game I've been saying that 7 is really that point where the game starts to get good for him. He does not have the 7th land, so he may have to fire off a Revelation that's a little smaller than he wants to, but he doesn't have to yet because he's actually ahead on the board. He has a 3-4 to his opponent's 2-1.
And that's counter spells in hand. Jeff lays a land. I think we're going to see a card get countered this turn from Dave. Ratchet Bomb, interesting.
So Jeff's gonna start off with the less, I think he's going worst card first to try to play around counter spells, and I do, which is one of the classic ways to play around a counter spell.
Dave has to decide if this Ratchet Bomb matters.
Right.
It is holding back. It can in several turns kill that Resto Angel or kill the Detention Sphere, and if it did kill the Detention Sphere, there would be an intimidating zombie there that it would be taking out.
Yeah, so it's interesting because normally Dave wouldn't care about that. It would take at least 4 turns to kill that Detention Sphere, and if the game's lasting 4 more turns, Dave Shiels has got to be really happy with that. The difference and the somewhat scary part is that it gives a 3-power Intimidator, and Dave is at 3 life.
And Dave has to figure out what he wants to do about this Lifebane zombie coming from Jeff Hoogland's hand. He could dissipate it. He says, here's my hand.
So that's very interesting. He decides not to dissipate it. He's at 3, and it is a 3-power Intimidator. This does lock Dave in to casting Sphinx's Revelation this turn. I think the reason he didn't dissipate it is, well, I don't know. I think he still wants to save that counterspell for a more, like, maybe a Thragtusk.
Well, I mean, if he does dissipate it, that means he can't Revelations this turn.
Right.
So, letting it hit, Revelations, let's hope for an answer.
Yeah, so he draws a bunch of counter spells. Now he has a Rewind, a Dissipate, a Negate, and another Restoration Angel. None of those help with Lifebane Zombie, which now has him on a 2-turn clock.
We see a land finally, though, and a pass.
Hoogland has his opening. He has that 3-1 Intimidator. Remember, Shiels did not find a way to answer Lifebane Zombie.
Shiels is at 6 currently, but about to be knocked down to 3.
See that first hit from Hoogland. All he needs is to survive for one more turn here and get that Lifebane Zombie in.
I wouldn't be unhappy with the casting of a Thragtusk here.
Yeah, I mean, Hoogland may want to play a Thragtusk just to get some more of those counterspells out of Shiels' hand. But he says no. He's just not even. He doesn't even want to. He'd rather just not lose the card.
There's an Azorius Charm, and Azorius Charm a temporary answer to that Lifebane Zombie.
Yeah, well, actually, based on the number of counterspells that are in Shiels' hand, you got to think that that's a permanent answer. A really good draw. Shiels needed that draw to not die there. There is a second problem, though, is that Ratchet Bomb is going to get an end-step Lifebane Zombie at some point here. So not out of the woods yet, but certainly closer for Dave Shiels.
Opens up with a Duress. What's your hand look like over there?
Well, that's gonna force a negate. Dave can't lose his Azorius Charm because he will lose the game if he loses the Azorius Charm.
There's the negate.
All right, so first counterspell forced out of Dave's hand. Remember, he still has 2 more Dissipates, a Rewind, and another negate. So no shortage of counterspells left.
In they come. Here comes the team.
Yeah, and Hoogland decides to swing the Disciple of Bolas. I'm not positive why he makes that play, as it's clearly going to get blocked by the Restoration Angel.
Azorius Charm on Lifebane Zombie.
Yeah, Shiels had a couple options. He also could have life-linked his Restoration Angel there. I mean, I think this is clearly the right play because now he can counter the Lifebane Zombie on the way back down.
There's a lot of mana on Jeff's side of the board still.
Remember, all the cards in Shiels' hand are a Restoration Angel and a bunch of counter spells. This Ratchet Bomb on end step is going to go to 3 counters, and then on the next end step will make a Lifebane Zombie. So in 2 more turns, Hoogland has a lethal attacker. So Shiels will have to draw into something by then. That's a lot of time for him, but he has to hit it.
Meanwhile, Dustin Flora with Junk Reanimator is up 2-1 versus Jerry Thompson. So it's going to go to Jerry for game 4.
Yeah, Jerry won game. So Jerry now on his last life trying to repeat his Invitational champion. Down 2 games to 1.
Jeff not casting that Thragtusk. War Leader's Helix drawn by Dave Shiels.
War Leader's Helix, that's another answer he was looking for. That should take care of that Lifebane Zombie. So now that Shiels is that might be what he needed to close off that last out that Hoogland had at the 3 damage.
You know, I really like the casting of the Thragtusks in there. Dissipate is going to be in that hand forever unless you do something about it.
Yeah, it is true. You know, you can't not play spells forever. I think what Hoogland's trying to do is maybe he wants to just play 2 spells at once when he does that.
So he's doing this, cracking the bomb, the Ratchet Bomb goes off. This is going to destroy the detention sphere.
An interesting play. This does open him up to getting Supreme Verdicted, and he does know that Shiels plays Supreme Verdicts. But yeah, Ratchet Bomb destroying all the 3 costs gets him back the Lifebane Zombie.
And we see a casting right now of Restoration Angel in response to the triggered ability of the Lifebane Zombie.
This is a little aggressive by Shiels. It takes down a lot of his counter spells to do that. You see he has Negate, Dissipate, Rewind, War Leader's Helix. I'm not sure. He decided that he actually wants to have a clock here. I'm not sure that that was what. Yeah, I'm surprised by the play. They didn't just let him take the Restoration Angel.
Okay, you can see a pretty intensely powerful hand of control spells. Now, Dave Shiels doesn't have any of these, doesn't have to worry about any of the cards in Jeff's hand if he wants. He can counter anything other than an Abrupt Decay right now. But then when he untaps, he can counter many things.
Yeah, and the thing is, Jeff needs to have a spell that deals 3 damage, and it's going to be really hard to fit that spell through Rewind, Dissipate, Dissipate. Actually, I think that's why Shiels is playing a second. Let me go ahead and say why I think she's playing the second Restoration Angel. You know that right now it would take a lot. You can count the number of card draws it would take for Jeff to resolve anything, right? Through 4 counter spells. That's about 4 turns worth of card draws. Shiels in 4 turns can actually deal 24 damage if he has 2 Restoration Angels. He might actually be counting and realizing, hey, this is pretty lethal if I just do it this way.
Liliana of the Veil, the first cast.
Yeah, this is the bait spell though. If Shiels counters this, he's gonna have to deal with a Thrag Tusk. And this is one of the reasons why playing that Restoration Angel put him in an awkward situation. If he had all the mana up here, he could rewind. And I really like actually how Hoogland played this, in that the first card he made was the Lifebane Zombie, which wasn't actually a spell, it was a cracking of the Ratchet Bomb, so Shiels couldn't get that free counter spell of rewind. He had to use his mana, and now he's a little stuck.
And Dave says, okay, Liliana eats one of the Restoration Angels.
Yeah, he just doesn't want a Thrag Tusk to resolve. I think he feels he can deal with the Liliana. He does have a Restoration Angel after all. What he can't deal with is a Thrag Tusk.
Jeff, thinking about his possible follow-ups, does he want to lay another? I think there's a Lifebane Zombie in hand, a second one. Yeah. I don't think he wants to cast his Thrag Tusk right now. From his line of play, he would have cast it earlier if he just wanted to use it as an expensive duress.
Right, I think what he's going to try to do next turn is he'll first swing with the Lifebane Zombie, forcing Shiels to tap 4 mana. Then he's going to probably try to make 2 threats and force Shiels to counter both of them. If Shiels doesn't have an 8th land, he won't be able to do it.
Was that an Azorius charm he just drew? No, it's a Sphinx's Revelation.
Another Revelation, so that's actually not a very good draw for Shiels. Well, it's a fine draw for him at the moment. He didn't have a Revelation.
Yeah, this coming turn sequence, Dave can attack with the Lifebane Zombie to kill the Liliana, and then leave his mana open and have the ability to War Leader's Helix to get rid of that zombie and still have a Dissipate up. He would much rather have had a land to be able to have the War Leader's Helix plus the Rewind.
Plus Rewind, plus another counter, because then he would actually be able to keep Hoogland off really any spells.
Hoogland's going to attack and force the War Leader's Helix.
Right, that'll tap down Dave's mana, so Hoogland should be able to get one more spell through. But after that, Dave pretty much has a wall of counter spell that it'll be very hard for Hoogland to penetrate for the rest of the game.
We see the Helix. Where is he going with it? Right to the zombie. Dave goes to 7. No threats on the table from Jeff. We see a Thrag Tusk. It's going to eat a Dissipate.
Yep, so taps up for Dissipate. Hoogland gets to have 1 card. Unfortunately, with only 3 mana, it's probably just going to be a Lifebane Zombie or a Liliana. It looks like Lifebane is the card he has.
Lifebane is going to re-show him the new information of the Revelation.
And that's going to be information he's going to be really unhappy to see. If it was just the counter spells, he would feel like he has a good chance here, but that Revelation really takes away a lot of the chances he has.
Woodland Cemetery afterwards. There's a Thrag Tusk and I think a Desecration Demon in Jeff's hand.
So we see a Celestial Flare drawn by Dave Shiels. So another answer to Lifebane Zombie. I think he has more removal post-board, it looks like. You know, that Intimidate, while inconvenient and almost life-threatening here, Shiels has a fair number of outs to it.
Jeff Hoogland, Deadbridge Chance?
So a turn too late on the Deadbridge. I mean, there's no way Shiels will let that resolve. And I think based on the board, Shiels is almost certainly not tapping out from here on out.
Jeff counts his mana, hoping it's 11. I'm not sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not quite there.
It's 9. Last turn he did the 3 and the 5, and then played a land. So with only 9, he can't really double up on relevant cards. he is in a rough spot.
Even if he could double up, Rewind is there to say no thank you.
Yeah, so there was that window which we talked about him having, and he almost was able to get across with Lethal in that window, but I feel like it's closed at this point. He's gonna need a lot of help. The problem is, like, his deck only draws 1 card per turn, and all the cards it draws can be counterspelled. So as soon as Dave stabilizes the board, it's gonna be really hard for him to resolve something to get back in.
4 cards for Dave Shiels, pulling out of the way of Jeff Hoogland's threats. Okay,
Yep.
Celestial Flare Island. Is that a Moorland Haunt?
Yep, a Moorland Haunt, Izzet Charm, and another Revelation were drawn. So, you know, just more control cards. I think more ways really to tighten up the board are now in Shiels' hand.
Now, if I'm trying to come up with the miracle draws for Jeff to win this game, it's gonna have to be, I feel like, multiple Thrag Tusks and Desecration Demons and Vraska and Liliana in a row.
And I'm not even sure that gets there because they all can still be counterspelled. You know, he doesn't have any way really to play around a counterspell outside of Abrupt Decay.
Well, I mean, I bring up multiple in a row because currently...
He has to run them out,
yeah,
right?
currently there's 3 in hand plus whatever he drew from the Revelations, so he has to push through them. The only way he's going to do that is just threat.
So it's his 4th, right now we're on his 4th threat resolving?
Yeah, that's pretty rough. There's a Lily.
All right, well, that is a threat. He does, you know, that's not bad for him. But remember, he is on right now a 6-turn clock from that Restoration Angel. So right now we're at his 4th threat resolving and on a 6-turn clock. It's actually getting close, you know?
A lot of mana. Jeff Hoogland here trying to get a game from Dave Shiels. Starts out. We have our first result in. Eric Smith, 3-2 over James Buckingham. That is Eric Smith with Jund. Defeats Bant Hexproof. Our first top 8 match result.
Yeah, Eric Smith was 5-3 with Jund during the Invitational. Standard was actually, you know, kind of a weaker format for him, but he's able to pull this together. He defeated James Buckingham's Hexproof deck. So now Eric Smith's into the semifinals of note. So that Eric Smith and that Jund deck will be playing the winner of this match between Shiels and Hoogland.
Jeff drops a Lifebane Zombie. Lifebane Zombie, a card that actually pulls a Rewind from Dave Shiels.
Yeah, I mean, and that makes sense. It's a threat. I think at this point, Shiels just actually feels like he can counter every threat. He has as many counter spells as Hoogland has cards in hand. So he can afford to be pretty aggressive.
Jeff follows up with a Thrag Tusk. A Dissipate is very likely, I think, to appear here.
Yeah, so we have Thrag Tusk. We'll see what Shiels goes, how he chooses to counter it, really. And that
There's
will
the Dissipate.
Will be the Dissipate talked about. So his remaining counter spells he has are a Dissipate and a Negate, I believe.
Definitely a Negate. We'll have to see what the other card is.
Right, and Shiels going to start to add to his offense. He adds the Spirit Token. That addition of a Spirit Token right now takes 1 turn off the clock. If he gets a second Spirit Token, it'll take a 2nd turn off the clock.
Dave with a big smile.
Yeah, he knows he's made it there. He knows he's closed that gap, especially with that Revelation in his hand.
Another Revelation.
Right. I think he knows he's gotten there.
Liliana has ceased to become a threat as well. The Moorland Haunt activation providing a buffer against any damage from that.
Yeah, the Moorland Haunt stops the Edict from working, and the fact that Shiels now is the guy with the Revelations means her plus ability is not particularly helpful either. We see a Scavenging Ooze draw from Hoogland. He is drawing threats as best as his deck can, but really they just don't seem to be enough threats now.
What's in your graveyard?
Well, just ask it. You know, the Scavenging Ooze can get pretty big right now.
And the Scavenging Ooze, depending on what is in the graveyard, might be able to stop Moorland Haunt, but I believe that there aren't any creatures left. We'll have to check when we see Liliana. A little bit unexciting, but it's a card. Maybe it'll draw something out.
I mean, and if you're like in the true control mindset, Shiels probably lets this one resolve because he can attack it down. You know, he'll give Hoogland another turn on the clock.
Jeff was really hoping to draw the negate there. If he was able to draw out that negate, maybe his Deadbridge chant would have had a chance.
And now he'll try for Scavenging Ooze. This one it's actually a threat. May get a counter from Shiels, we'll see.
I think Dave is reviewing his graveyard.
Yeah, Dave doesn't have to be too worried because Dave has Celestial Flare for whenever Hoogland decides to attack. You know, in addition to, of course, the Sphinx's Revelation that he has. He probably can just race the Scavenging Ooze. I'm guessing he'll let this guy resolve.
Seems reasonable. Dave pondering his options. Liliana activates the minus ability, and
right.
Dave loses a token and then draws 6 cards.
He's just going to go ahead and reload here. Dave now up to 14. Yeah, drawing 6. He should have answers to everything at this point. If he didn't already, I'm not. You know, this just seems like while he could use the spells he had in his hand to thread the needle and win the game there, I think he's just going to go ahead with, you know, the big control hammer that is Sphinx's Revelation and just kind of get this one.
While Dave is tapped out, Jeff Hoogland takes this opportunity to create a 5/5 Scavenging Ooze, eating tons of creatures in his own graveyard. This keeps him out of a Sphinx's Revelation. It does not do much to stop, though, the Celestial Flare that Dave Shiels has in his hand.
We see a fair amount of burn there drawn from Jeff Hoogland. We saw a turn burn and a War Leader's Helix. Both came in off the Revelation. Should help him speed up the clock for winning. We see here also Syncopate drawn. He now has yet another counterspell. That one a pretty expensive counterspell at this point in the game. And he also has drawn Thundermaw Hellkite, which we were talking about actually during sideboarding whether or not he felt like this is a matchup where he'd need Thundermaw Hellkite to help close out a game. He has boarded them in. I kind of feel like it's been demonstrated here that no, he didn't really need Thundermaw Hellkite to close out this game, but it's not a bad thing to have.
I also kind of wonder if, in some ways, he gets to the point where he forces Jeff into the uncomfortable question, hey, which way are you going to go? Are you going to have the creature removal or not, buddy?
Right. So we actually do have an upset in one of our other matchups. The number 1 seed, Michael Braverman, did fall in 4 games to Andrew Tenjum. So Andrew Tenjum with his Naya deck took that one down 3-1, and he will be in our semifinals. He is waiting the winner of Dustin Flora and Jerry Thompson.
Meanwhile, Dave Shiels in this matchup attacks Liliana, kills it. Detention Sphere on Scavenging Ooze. Nothing left for Jeff Hoogland but his Deadbridge chant and whatever he's drawn.
Hoogland's drawn, and you know he's gonna fight this one all the way out to the end. He draws. It looks like some modified Thragtusk there. And
we might have gotten
it'll get some kind of answer.
Yeah, we might have gotten to the point where Dave Shiels no longer cares. With a turn burn in hand, he can just get rid of it with 1 card.
Right, it's really similar to a counter spell, but that means he can save his counter spells for other things. Yeah, he has a lot of ways to answer this. We'll see which one he chooses. I think you're right, he's just gonna choose the turn burn.
Hey, you are a little wimp. Now you're dead.
Yeah, it did buy Hoogland more turns, but there's very little that Hoogland can do with those turns.
Syncopate, War Leader's Helix, Thundermaw Hellkite. So many options. Dave Shiels looks like he's assembling 5 mana.
Yeah, and we see here, yeah, just a lot of options.
Cavern of Souls, Thundermaw in for 8. Down to 13 for Jeff Hoogland.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the other decks we currently are already seeing in the top 4. We have Eric Smith and Jund and Andrew Tenjum as Naya as the first 2 decks in our top 4. I know we saw a lot of diversity in strategies, but it looks like mid-range decks right now are still kind of, once again, like asserting themselves on the topic of the Invitational.
I agree. I mean, the way that Wizards of the Coast has been designing their Magic cards lately, these very, very powerful, mid-costed spells from like 4 to 6 mana seem like they are much of what Magic is about right now.
Right.
We see a Desecration Demon from Dave Shiels.
Yeah, it's going to try to hold off the fort, but or from Hoogland. It's going to try to hold off the attack that's Restoration Angel and Thundermaw Hellkite, but it's got a really tough job to do. Shiels is now switched from control mode to aggressive mode, and it's astounding to know just how fast the deck does that.
Yeah, I mean, once you're in this space, once you're moving into a spot where you are the aggressor and you have the ability to control what goes on the stack in the form of counter spells, you can usually wrap things up against a deck that's more controlling.
So we do see here, he doesn't actually have the lethal yet, it doesn't look like, but yeah, we'll go and see how he presses this attack. He has a 6/6 to get through.
He uses a Spirit Token just to tap the demon.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now he swings Hoogland down to 5. He has 4 points of burn in hand. He'll have to wait another turn.
Desecration Demon hanging out as a 7/7, a swamp drawn. Jeff just packs it up.
Yeah, I mean, the win's on the board there. He sacrifices the angel to tap the demon, swings the dragon for 5. There's probably numerous ways that Dave gets that win there, and Jeff's aware.
Okay, we see going back to the sideboards, Dave Shiels breaks out his deck list. He wants to check to make sure what Jeff Hoogland has in there. Just a little reminder, both players going back to their sideboards, seeing if they want to change their plan ever so slightly. If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan in the booth with Matthias Hunt. On the left, Dave Shiels with Flash. On the right, Jeff Hoogland. It's black-green, it's the Rock. We saw Thundermaw Hellkite, we saw Detention Sphere, we saw Negate all come in for Dave. Did we see Celestial Flare? You said you saw at least one.
Yeah, we saw at least one Celestial Flare. We saw at least one Thundermaw Hellkite. We definitely saw the Negate, so that's up to 9 cards or 11 cards with the Detention Spheres that he's boarded in. I doubt he's boarded in all 11 of them, considering we also saw all the cards that are in his main deck. So I think he's kind of doing, he's valuing on each card, which is something that you often see in a control deck.
Now, I'm looking at that number of sideboard cards. I wonder if he's shaving and putting in a few here and there, because looking at the cards in his main deck, I thought I saw every spell in his main deck, except for Supreme Verdict, show up in Game 2.
Well, I don't think he may not have Augur of Bolas in the deck anymore. We didn't really see any of those.
That's fair.
He may instead just want cards that he knows have value. The Augur isn't particularly relevant here. It doesn't, I guess in theory blocks the Scavenging Ooze, but that's about it.
Jeff Hoogland, I wonder if he's reconsidering those Ratchet Bombs. They certainly did do something, but did they do enough? Now, we see Jeff will be right back. It is an hour and plus into this match, 2 games down, up to 3 to go. Jeff has a long road ahead of him. He would have to win the next 3 games in order to take this match.
Yeah, and so we could see, it's going to be an uphill climb for him. He did say, though, he still is more excited about the post-court games, and we saw, I think, a lot of that potential game plan in there. We saw, for example, we saw the extra Liliana, we saw the Duresses. He does have a little more of a focused game plan. I still think the challenge on him is to present a clock.
It's going to be actually pretty hard to present that clock, unfortunately for him. I mean, his deck does not have a lot of cards that make a clock.